Oh, it used to mean so much. You hear that music. Maybe it'll mean something again this weekend. Florida goes to Knoxville, Tennessee. One last chance, Chris Doering, or I guess the most recent chance, to make an impression, right? I mean, 3 unranked opponents. Florida's doing just fine. 2 ranked opponents at home. They've gotten, not beaten. They've gotten road graded. So, you get another chance. Are you like me? You almost wish Tennessee hadn't lost at Arkansas. How does that work as a player? Because as fans, we always like it bothers us if that's where they stumble. You feel like they've got their extra attention. Is there anything to that?
Yeah, I mean, there might be something to that. I got asked a similar question yesterday by our buddy Pat Dooley, who said, what was it like, when you were playing at Florida, and did you hope the team before you didn't lose? I was like, dude, we didn't give a damn what the team before us did when I was at Florida. Like, we were the bullies. We showed up and just beat whoever we played. So it's a little different situation now. I think from my perspective, there were some things that Oklahoma presented to Tennessee defensively that Arkansas's defensive coordinator, Travis Williams, went in and saw on tape and kind of went to Sam Pittman and told him kind of what his thoughts were and asked if he could kind of retool what they were doing defensively. And, to their credit, they not only put it in, but the players played it really well. And I think if you go back and look at what Florida did last year to Tennessee, they played fast. They were physical. They were aggressive. You have to be able to have guys that can pursue from the inside out with the way that they have, an answer for everything you do from a number count standpoint in the box and throwing the ball out to the perimeter, to the receivers there on the wide receiver screens. I thought they did a good job of that last year, and I'm hoping that can be a similar situation this year. But to your point, I wish they wouldn't necessarily have seen where they were weak so that they could make those corrections leading up to the Florida game.
Well, listen, if you'd have told me the same thing for the previous 4 weeks, I would have said it doesn't matter. Florida's not showing the ability to stop anyone, including the Mississippi States of the world. The defense definitely played better the other day. Chris, a lot was made during the broadcast of some changes that Billy Napier did practice-wise and what he's having the guys do in that bye week. What do you attribute? What I think probably top to bottom was it not the crispest, most buttoned-up win maybe for Napier ever, maybe not the biggest, but just it looked like it's supposed to look when you dominate and beat a team.
It did. In to Florida's credit, you can only play the team that's on your schedule, and they showed up and handled that team rather easily, albeit as an underdog as well, which was one of the more surprising / humbling things to think about, Florida being an underdog in the swamp, but. That wasn't a great UCF team. I mean, I watched the tape yesterday, both sides of the ball. They were missing some players. They're not all that fast. With that being said, Florida pretty much dominated and had their way with them. I would have liked to have seen more consistency on offense, this fast start and getting up 24 quickly and then kind of putting the brakes on wasn't exactly what I was hoping for, but they did. They looked cleaner, and the biggest thing that I want to praise about Saturday night was the environment in the swamp. Obviously, I was in the studio, but it looked and felt like the old swamp, and for a team that was coming in at 500 to generate that kind of interest, sell out in the swamp, and to have the fans show up that way, I thought it was awesome. Now, obviously, going on the road this week, but this is a team that Florida's had a bit of mastery over the last decade and a half, so. Even though they're over 2 touchdown underdogs, maybe there's a way that Florida can pull it off.
Boy, the mastery goes back a lot further than the decade and a half. I was looking up some numbers since 1976. So the last 50 years, Florida's 28-8 against Tennessee. You can break it down to just about any window. In the last 30 meetings, Florida is 24-6 against Tennessee, and in the last 20 meetings, the Gators are 18-2 against Tennessee, including beating. I mean, if they weren't top 10, they were fringe top 10 when they came to Gainesville last year, and Florida won. So, take us inside the mindset. This is something that's existed, for a while. I mean, Peyton Manning was there, and you were there, and Tennessee couldn't beat Florida. It gets to a point in these series where there's something to these long runs of success that go outside of X's and O's and particular Saturdays?
But it's interesting because even now more than ever, very few players on this roster for either team have had a lot to do with any of those games that you just talked about, with the transfer portal and guys moving around as much as they do. So in some cases, I don't even think Diego Pavia knows that Vanderbilt used to stink. Like, coming from New Mexico, I don't even know that he knows the history, and maybe that's a good thing. And maybe that's a good thing for some of the Tennessee guys that may not have been a part of this rivalry before. But I think the thing that does matter is that it's brought up by folks like you and I, that it's talked about all week long, that they have to answer questions about it. So I think there's something to that. But I do think that there are instances where teams just have the other team's number, the other coach's number, and Florida, for whatever reason, has had that. And I think, even though a lot of these Florida guys haven't been a part of this roster of the rivalry for a long time, they do hear about the success of Florida over Tennessee, and they come in expecting to win. I think there is something to that part of the mental game.
I almost literally think there's some sort of supernatural osmosis between fan bases and teams or franchises.
Yeah.
They kind of like just kind of almost pick up on that in a certain way. So Tennessee, man, 15.5-point favorites. It seems like an awful big number, but we're going to find out if just how much of the mojo, remains. Give me a scenario where Florida pulls an upset Saturday night.
Think about the last time Florida went up there. Hendon Hooker was the quarterback at Tennessee. They were rolling at that point. And Florida, I thought that was the best game plan that Florida had and the best play calling maybe in the entire Billy Napier tenure. You remember Anthony Richardson using him getting outside of the pocket and throwing the ball on some bootlegs and nakeds and stuff. Like, I thought that was a great job. And then I guess defensively last year they had a really good plan for Tennessee and their offense last season. So I'm not concerned. I don't think there's any great quarterbacks in the SEC this year. I'm surprised by that because the experience and all the names. But week to week, the inconsistency at the quarterback play has really held a lot of these teams back. You look at Ole Miss losing a couple weeks ago at home to Kentucky. Georgia struggling with Carson Beck in the first half there. I don't know that there's any great quarterback. And I watched Nico Iamaleava, went back and watched the tape yesterday against Arkansas's defense. He was late on throws. He was inaccurate on throws. He didn't necessarily look like he had his eyes in the right place. So as much as we talk about Nico being this great quarterback, he's still a freshman and still only started a handful of games. I think there is a scenario. Florida can get on the same page defensively if they can all make sure that they are sound in their alignment and assignment details. I think they can stop this Tennessee offense. They've not been as dominant as we saw them against NC State. And in hindsight, that NC State win is a little fraudulent. And I think the offense is coming together a little bit. Be nice to get Trey Wilson back for that game on Saturday night. But I think, Graham Mertz, you look at the way that first drive, almost 8 minutes, came out 7 of 8, 4 of 4 on third downs. I think if you can have some success early on, I think there's a chance that Florida can stay in this game. And certainly if Florida gets up late in the second half, I mean, the pressure is squarely on Tennessee after they lost. They got zero margin for error after losing that game and still having Alabama and Georgia on the schedule. So I think there's a lot of pressure squarely on the Vols that can allow the Florida Gators just to go in there and play freely.
That's a great segue because I wonder this about another game in the SEC, and so we'll let you hit on this before we let you go. Ole Miss LSU feels like it could be an elimination game. I mean, they both have a loss already. Ole Miss goes to LSU this weekend. Those are two teams that if the playoffs were today, most projections would probably have them both in. And I know there's a lot of ball to be played. I guess my point is if Ole Miss or LSU loses today, you feel like they'll lose again, right? Yeah. So it almost feels like Ole Miss LSU this early in the year is could be a loser, enjoy bowl season. It won't be in the playoff.
It's funny, too, because, we're just trying to figure out this new landscape with the 12-team playoff and what it's going to be like. And everybody said that regular season games aren't going to matter.
And they matter more.
I agree with you. We're in the beginning of October, and these games are going to matter. These are big-time football games, and I thought 10-2 in the SEC would get everybody in. I thought that the SEC would probably get 4 or 5 teams in, and maybe have a couple 11-1 teams and a couple 10-2 teams. But I think there's going to be a lot of 10-2 teams after what we've seen so far. The parity in the conference, the week-to-week inconsistencies. So I'm with you. And the schedule for Ole Miss, the resume is not good enough to be able to necessarily feel confident that 10-2 gets them in with who their non-conference schedule included. So I do think that there's a lot of pressure. I do think that both of those teams look like they're not impervious to another loss down the road. And maybe the biggest thing for Ole Miss is they haven't had their bye week yet. LSU's coming off a bye, and they playing at home, Tiger Stadium, 100th year of that stadium. It's going to be rocking, and I think Ole Miss may be in for some trouble on Saturday night.
Ole Miss favored in that one. That surprises me. You bring up such a cool point. It's a great point, and that is this. Somehow, back in the day, before this, when it comes to regular season game matters, there was this feeling sometimes you couldn't lose a single game, so that makes it more important. And what we're learning now is the fact that you can lose a game makes it more important.
Yeah.
It's weird. It doesn't end you, right?
It does. It keeps you in the mix, and at the same time, with the improvement of the conference and the addition of Texas and Oklahoma, it is by no means does losing one game give you the margin to be able to just relax and play the rest of the year. And I think Alabama's in trouble. I think Georgia could be in trouble. I mean, it's going to be exciting the next 2 months. Yeah,
and like you said too, we don't know what it's supposed to look like. Is 9-3 fine? It might be fine for the bottom of the 9-12 range. Who knows? We're going to find all that out. Hey, Chris, as always, excellent work, my friend. Appreciate you. We'll talk to you next Tuesday.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right, there.
Hey guys, Taylor Dahl here. Thanks so much for checking out our 1010XL Florida Gators page. If you're looking for more Florida content, subscribe now. But if you're looking for some professional football, NFL content, head over to our 1010XL Jaguars page.